What's goody? It's Emily Van Warren, and this is Processa Talks.
Hi, my name is Jailina Spawal,
And you are listening to
Processa Talks. Remember, you are loved, powerful, and divine.
That's right.
Hey, we're back in action here on Processa Talks podcast.
That's right.
If you don't know, now you know. This is a podcast where we invite amazing, talented artists and creatives, Black and brown artists, to share their work, share their practice, have conceptual conversations.
Love those.
And today we have the honor of sitting with Avila Santo. Can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What are your practices?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, first of all,
Yes.
in your studio. And, I have been following your process and your work as a curator for years now. And I love seeing what you're doing with Processa. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Avila, S2-EP.3, Santo, my full name. Some people also know me as Ifa. Some people also know me as Gavião, depending on what context you know me in. I'm a artist. I'm a capoeirista. I'm a drummer. And I think I'm a little bit of like a philosopher too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like to philosophize, conceptualize, have heady conversations.
You're in the right place. Okay, so I want to go back into memory lane.
All right.
Can you tell me what was your upbringing like as a child? And I also know that you come from a very artistic family.
Yeah.
Me and my partner Cameron, we had the pleasure of actually going to your father's Capoeira
that's right.
school in LA. I don't know if it was 2018 or 2019. We took a class with y'all. It was so beautiful.
That's right. I taught you guys.
Yes.
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
It's a core memory of like
Yeah.
that trip to LA, and then we were doing like capoeira on the beach after.
Oh, I love it. Capoeira will do that.
Yeah,
It'll do that.
it's so fun and like beautiful. So can you tell me about that upbringing of just being in a very like artistic family?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I'm a first child, which I feel like has to be said because that informs a lot in my life and in my practice, I think. So two parents, both artists, father's from Brazil, from Salvador, Bahia, and my mother's born in LA. Her family is from Eastern Europe. And so I grew up essentially in my parents' capoeira school, which was also a cultural center, Brazilian cultural center. And I also was traveling a lot with them, with their traveling dance group, Ballet Folclórico do Brasil. So we traveled all around the world. And so I also grew up in like ensaios, or like rehearsals, with amazing drummers, singers, dancers, martial artists, and even just like seeing staging and lighting. And when I wasn't on tour with them and in the Capoeira studio, I was with my grandparents, who my grandmother is still an artist, visual artist, painter, works in ceramics as well. So I would either be hanging out with her in her studio or hanging out with my grandfather. These are my grandparents on my mother's side in the US. I grew up in LA. And my grandfather was a attorney who then turned into a judge later on, who was really like Yeah, like he was really involved with the civil rights movement, essentially.
Wow.
And organizing, particularly around black voting rights in the South during Freedom Summer. And yeah, so I also loved soccer. I loved soccer, and I loved drumming. So I think that was, if I were to give you a little snapshot of my childhood, it was that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So a lot of like movement.
Yeah. A lot of movement.
A lot of tapping into the body, even like since you were young.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time I started with school, it was almost impossible for them to get me to just sit down.
Right. Our visitor here,
Yeah.
just making sure the conversation's going well. Another question I have is, in terms of who you are now as an adult, do you sometimes within your creative process tap into those earlier memories?
Yeah. No, thank you for that question. I think so, because a lot of, even if I'm not doing it consciously, a lot of my work now has to do with travel, in like the broadest sense of the word. So like sometimes that could mean traveling to, through a song to be with my family in Brazil, or traveling to be with a forgotten ancestor in West Africa, or it could be traveling to, like a prior version of myself, maybe like a childhood version of myself. And I mean, there's something to be said about just what inherently is gonna connect me to my childhood by me just continuing to do capoeira, continuing to drum, continuing to reference those foundational elements of my life. So I don't necessarily think of it like me revisiting childhood, excuse me, but now that you put it that way, I guess that's what it is. Yeah, but it's not exclusive to that.
Right.
It exists in other kind of planes as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know you have a multitude of experience in music and making music, sound, producing, and also in movement and capoeira. And recently you have been taking on the new role and also identity as a conceptual artist. So can you tell me more about that decision of expanding in a lot of ways and what influenced the decision?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. My fiance, who you're familiar with, would always tell me, you're a conceptual artist. And I don't know if I always heard it at that point, but I think life has shown me over the years, as especially like growing up, seeing music in a kind of like, in its iterations in a non-commodified way. For example, hearing drumming in a ritual context in candomblé or in Ifa, or even in capoeira. It's like I was hyper aware of like what's lost in music when it is commodified in the way that it is, particularly in the US. So although it might seem like a little bit of a step outside of my expertise in music, I really look at it as me just claiming all of the connections that naturally come from making music, which is, not just something to kind of like accentuate, but it's tied to concept, it's tied to story, it's tied to movement, it's tied to dance, and it has been for so long. So it's actually more of a reclaiming, and I don't look at it so much as like a departure. I look at it as me not so much trying to fit into this particular kind of music box that I think I was trying to for a while. You know, like I was specialized in school to, you know, through like orchestra, band, and then going to jazz school, getting a classical jazz and classical harmony training. I was kind of like specialized to do a specific thing, but concept never came into the question, into the combo. If it did, it's maybe in like an improvisational context, but you know, like I couldn't forget about the ladainha, for example. I couldn't forget about, you know, like more recently when I went to Nigeria and was initiated into Ifa, I had all these kind of like recollections and just like rememberings of what the purpose of music is, which is to accentuate prayer and dance and concept, you know, like concept. Right. So they're intrinsic.
Right.
So for me, it's like I look at myself as a conceptual artist. I guess kind of like second to just a continuation of being a musician and a drummer.
I think that's a good point, because I think sometimes the downfall of school is like, well, school is great because of technique, right? You get to learn like the basics or the history. You're studying, you're honing in on like skill, technique, and all the formal aspects. But it's true. The only thing, like, school cannot teach you like full on embodiment. It can't teach you, you know, art is an expression of your spirituality. It can't really teach you that. It can't teach you just like personal concepts. That's something that you definitely have to form on your own. And I do get you just taking on also just even the title of conceptual artist, because it is broader. I think a lot of artists go through this of like identifying as, I'm a painter, I'm a sculptor, and then it's like when you take on those very specific identities, there's this big expectation of you're the best sculptor. You have to be the most like, it has to be a Michelangelo type sculpture, or like painting, you have to be the greatest painter. Those colors got to be blended, and you know what I mean? And it's more so this expectation around formal technique and like specialization rather than saying, I'm an artist. It's more so an embodiment of like expansion in a lot of ways. Like whatever I do, whatever I make, that's my art.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. And it's like also, if I am just a composer or just a drummer, then I'm not necessarily allowed, or it's not assumed that I have an interest in film. It's not assumed that I have an interest in sculpture or painting.
Right.
And it's almost like I'm not allowed into the convo. I've never been the type of person who isn't drawing inspiration from different mediums, different types of artists and artistic practices. So in that sense, I guess conceptual artist allows for me to pursue those interests.
That goes right into my next question.
Cool.
To dive right into your process and concepts, tell me about your relationship and concepts around the drum, and what does the drum signify for you?
Oh man, okay, so I'll start off with a Yoruba proverb, Egun ikubata bango egunde, which says that the sound, like the hitting of the drum, announces the arrival of the ancestors. So, for me, my connection with the drum is everything. It's the foundation of all the work I do. I think that to be a drum in a more expanded kind of conceptual way is to be heard, and it's to be present, and it's to make that presence felt. I think it's also a way, if I strip it back and look at sort of like the assembly of rhythm, and rhythm being like the byproduct of drum, it's also a way of being able to weave through the polyrhythm, through accenting. I think that drum is also collision. So collision of sound, collision of idea, collision of imagery. I think there's also the circularity piece as well. The drum is something timeless in the sense that what we're hearing is, and this is a unique phenomenon, it's like water or something. It's like, this is something that has been being heard, like the wood, like animal skin, hands, iron. It's something that is become embedded into our DNA through generations and generations of hearing it. And then we talk about like how drumming has also been like something that's deeply connected to our spirit and to our liberation as Black and brown people as well. So, I mean, I love the drum. I'm still unpacking all of its significance to me, but I always leave space for it in any type of ideation process.
So on Process, like, I don't know, while you were speaking, why I kept thinking of the movie Soul. Like when they're like playing an instrument and it's like, I think that what's beautiful about that movie is that it kind of captured like how an artist can go into this other space or a very spiritual space when they're playing an instrument or when they're doing something that they love and they're passionate about. And it's going to be hard to put this in language, so I know it's going to be a hard question, but you know, where do you feel like you are taken when you're playing an instrument or playing the drums?
Yeah, I mean, it's a space of timelessness. I thought about this a lot. It's a place of also being sort of like, because there's a physicality to drumming also that is like really liberating and is also like difficult, you know? It's very difficult, especially once you start trying to get like the very particular sounds out of the drums, like that technical aspect of it. So, you know, and it's also like this place of, what I found from that kind of like pursuit of the technical is that like it's like the role that the spirit plays in like getting the sounds out of the drum as well. So I think it's a place of like deep mirroring where I'm able to see through every kind of like tone, through every sound that I make, kind of like a snapshot of where my body, my physical and my spiritual is at in the moment through the sound. And so it's a really interesting type of phenomenon happening with drumming. Yeah. Wow. In the way that I think about it. Yeah. And like, I also think about drumming as an invocation. And, you know, I grew up in like ritual context, candomblé, or even in Ifa, seeing people get what we call getting mounted. So it's like pretty much spirit coming down and just like, you know, people catching something, you know, like and that is like directly connected to the drum.
It is.
Right. And like if the music is hitting right, you see it happening a lot more. Right. So I think the other part of the drumming that is like great and that I don't need to understand is like the unknown part too.
Yeah, it's interesting because like there's like the spiritual aspect, but also like there's also science behind it too.
Yeah.
I think of like I've been looking into a lot of like somatic movement and, you know, what does it mean to literally like move your body, dance, shake. and move like those tensions, you know. And I think there has to be studies on like drumming and the effects that it has like on your body, because you literally feel the vibration in your body. It's not, oh, I hear it and it's, you know, just a sound. It's like a felt, you know, vibration. So I think that does shake up some energies and loosens tensions in the person, you know, I guess dancing to it too.
And I think it's also like there's levels to it as well. Like different drums like elicit different type of energies too, and different type of frequencies, which is essentially what we're talking about. Like when I think about a wooden drum with animal skin on it, that also is like, it's so similar to our body, and like the way that we're kind of crafted in this membrane type of casing, as a container for spirit, as a container for, or if you look scientifically, for all these different worlds that are inside of us.
How much of are we like 90% water or 80%?
Right.
We're mostly water.
And water is essentially just, you know, like waves, and sound is essentially waves as well.
Exactly.
It's different ways of tracking movement. So this all could get very kind of like heady.
Yeah.
Which I did tell you I like to go there, but like, listen.
Essentially, we are energy frequencies, and so when you play the drums, we're moving to different frequencies.
Yeah, and to kind of like circle back to your question before about my work as, you know, a composer and a producer. I think that there's something also just about like having your own stories, and like I've worked on theater, dance, performing for other bands, touring with other bands, making scores for films. And I think that what that brought forward to me was just that I had stories that I wanted to tell also. Yeah.
I can see that.
And I don't think everyone has that.
So I wanted to talk about your lineage, and correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's the Adesanya lineage?
Oh yeah, okay.
Is that how you say it?
That's right,
Adesanya lineage of Isese
Ifa.
Isese Ifa in Nigeria.
Yeah.
How does your diverse cultural and spiritual backgrounds shape your work?
Okay, so I see. I'll approach that as two different questions.
Okay.
Yes, Ibashe Modupwe to my spiritual family in Oderemo, Nigeria. If you're watching, Aburu Aboye. I was introduced to my one of my elders who initiated me, who is Falokun Fashegun, who's actually in LA, who grew up with me. Like, he's seen me my whole life. He trained with my father and was introduced to the Orisha through Candomblé through my father. He's one of those people who is deep into research, and as he followed, you know, learning more and more and more, he got into Ifa, Isese Ifa, and eventually was connected with Falolu Adesanya and the father of Falolu Adesanya, Ibaye, who initiated him in Nigeria. So that's my connection to the Oderemo Adesanya lineage in Nigeria. Wow. And my connection to spirituality in my work. That's a good question. Yeah, so my understanding of it now is that I learn and kind of embody some of the concepts of these like spiritual concepts through art making. And it's an easier way for me to make sense of it through writing a song about it, or through trying to, make some type of visual juxtaposition or kind of like collage about it. It helps me make sense of it, especially as it relates to my very unique kind of like makeup, being Ashkenazi Jewish and Afro-Brazilian. So, and this also ties back to that first child syndrome, where it's like, I'm the first of a lot of things in my family and just in general, first Black person on my mom's side of the family, first person born in America, first person to like go to college, first Jewish person on my dad's side of the family. So first child. So, it's like I've always had to create things and just kind of like see myself or hear myself to be able to kind of like understand what I'm working through.
Kind of like an outside looking in
kind
of perspective.
Yeah, because I think that like the image and like seeing oneself, we've seen how powerful of a tool that is if we just look at the brazen confidence that white people have in the U.S., for example. It's because they've seen themselves. They've seen themselves in any capacity, doing anything. And so I think for me, it's important for me to just create and to take up space and to, as I am. And I think that ties into the spirituality of it, because I'm pulling from elements of like mystic Judaism, Kabbalah, that I didn't so much grow up with, but that I've been introduced to more recently, and then pulling of the spirituality from Candomblé, from Ifa, from even like Congo, from Capoeira, and making sense of my existence through it. And there's something very spiritual about that.
A common conversation that I was having with a lot of the artists in a residency that I did with Next Haven, and actually the theme of the show that we put together at the end of the residency was around like hybridity and like multiplicity, and engaging like with the multiple senses of selves. Because it is a common also like American story to come from multiple cultural backgrounds or multiple upbringings, or let's say if someone was adopted, or just to come from these different lineages and not to feel like, oh, I have to be in this box. And also within my art, I have to convey myself in this one-dimensional way of like, how do we encourage one another to embody like these multiple forms of ourselves, and it's only gonna get like more expansive as we grow older if you allow that to like flourish.
Yeah. And I think to sort of like try to dive into those multiplicities of self is also to revoke this sort of like monoculture that comes along with colonialism, and with like this new phenomenon of the nation state. So it's like us trying to tap into what we are beyond that also, which I think is important, because there's so much that's lost if we're looking at the US, when you subscribe to just American identity. So much that's lost. I think about the language that's lost, the cultures that are lost. So it's important work that we're doing in that, and I think it's important that you're interfacing and having those combos with those artists, because all of us have it. The U.S. is new. Most of the countries that we're in now are new.
Right.
So it's a slippery slope if we start, you know, trying to find ourselves like in totality within that limited framework.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also like, my mind just went like, whoo. The visual of reclaiming roots, like what you were talking about earlier. It's this act of like reclamation of this lineage, the ancestors, all of these things were already there. And how do you, as yourself now, how do you reach back, but also like reach forward at the same time of like creating creating these new identities that you feel like are more aligned with like the current version of yourself.
Yeah, no, that's something I think about a lot. And it's so liberating to not have to come up with new ideas out of thin air, actually, which I feel like I was doing a lot in the earlier stages of my creative process, my journey. There's so much work that has been done already, and I love referential making right now. And like there's some, like I could take consolation that whatever I make, as long as I'm listening to what is trying to come through, it's gonna have my stamp on it. It's gonna, you know, like it'll have its own authenticity to it, but I don't need to try to come up with something new necessarily. You know, I like the idea of just kind of like bringing other people's stories, and just like whether it's ancestry, whether it's whatever it may be. I like having room for others right now, and not just people, but other ideas, and just inviting that into the process.
Okay. Yeah. That goes right into my next question.
I love it.
Of making room for others. And on that note, let's talk about your interdisciplinary collaborations.
Yeah.
So you collaborated with artists like Khalil Joseph, Terrence Nance, and Allison Sarr. How do these interdisciplinary collaborations influence your creative output and expand your artistic horizons?
Yeah, wow. That's a great question. So I think that what I get the most from collaborating with the other interdisciplinary artists is just kind of like their story and like what they're working through and moving through, and what's and like what's moving and working through them as well, and just bearing witness to it. As a musician and a composer, for me it was about, with those three collaborations in particular, it was about coming up with the sound and coming up with the feeling musically that was gonna get that story out the best way possible. I think the other thing I learned in those processes is just like how often actually my instincts are exactly what are needed, which for some reason it was kind of like that was a whole existential moment for me, to realize that, you know, my sensibilities could actually be tied up in someone else's story, was like a big kind of like a aha moment. It kind of broke down a lot of barriers for me. So yeah, I'm like super proud of the work that I've done with Terrence, with Khalil, with Allison, with Itzel, with so many other artists. I've had a lot of work and a lot of opportunities to collaborate with folks, and I drop on them all the time. Yeah.
So let's talk about world building, because I think also what you're speaking of is, you know, worlds involve people and
Yeah.
and community as well. So, you've spoken about your fascination with creative world building as a means to highlight diasporic identity. How do you approach constructing these worlds in your art, and what narratives do you aim to convey? Also, like community, world building with community, but also like what does your world within your conceptual work look like?
Yeah, I think the world is always contingent on, the particular piece that's being worked on. At the moment, the world I'm completely embedded into is this Iluhoda, what I'm calling Iluhoda world, which is, it translates roughly to drum wheel. And it's this idea of the drum as a vessel and as a takeoff point into the unseen, into like multiplicity, multidimensionality, and that in itself has a lot of worlds that have presented itself already. You know, so much so that I got to a point where I had to just write a treatment. I just had to write a script, start writing scripts about it, because it was getting so out of my
Scripts as in
physical.
wait. Scripts as in characters within this world? Okay.
Yeah, and like stories and actual spaces
Okay.
that I didn't have access to in the physical realm. So yeah, I just started writing scripts and sending them to, my friends who work in film, and I'm still working on them. But yeah, I started writing because I didn't have access to all these different places that I was, that were kind of like coming up in the creative process. That's where I'm at. That's where I've been at recently. But world building and sense of community, you said, right? Yeah, I think the difference goes back to that collaboration piece I was talking about. It's just when I'm collaborating with somebody, I want to peel back kind of like the layers of who they are, where their family comes from, what their fears are, what their challenges are, and I want to embed those into the world so that whatever kind of work we're doing on like the day to day, even on like a metaphysical, emotional level, I like to put that into the work so that that kind of third wall between the work and our life could be cleared, and that we could just, and it makes sense for me because, like I said, like I process things in my real life through art. So I tend to work with people who are doing the same thing.
Okay, so world building, you're creating scripts and characters. Can you say the name of the world again?
Iluhoda.
Iluhoda.
Iluhoda. So Ilu is drum in Yoruba. In like an expanded way, it just means something that's hit.
Okay.
Being a drum. I kind of spoke on that earlier. And Hoda is a wheel. It's also, in Capoeira, it's where you get together with community and play. It's where music meets the movement, meets the community.
Okay.
And it's also thinking a lot about circularity, and something I talked about before, and the significance of circles, like culturally, but also just when we look at our surroundings, when we look at Earth, when we look at, or like it was even like, this is kind of going off a little bit, but I had this experience a couple years ago where I was drumming a lot. I was just kind of like therapy. I was going and I was drumming. I was locking myself in a room, and I was in London. And it was really, weather was terrible outside, so I would just go and drum for hours, just as a means to kind of like move through the discomfort of being in a place that was so kind of like nasty outside weather-wise, and I was also like just off of initiation in Nigeria to Ifa, so I was just trying to step up to the moment, and so I was drumming, and it felt like it didn't feel like I was sitting straight and the room around me was moving, circling, but it felt like matter in general, like just started circling around me. And then the faster I was drumming, the faster it would circle around. And then the slower I was drumming, the slower it would move. And so I was just like, what is that?
Yeah.
But it made sense to me that the motion that was happening, even though I had no idea what was happening, was cyclical. It was moving in a circle. And so then naturally I start to try to make sense of what that was. And I think that also is part of the reason that I got on like the Ilu Hoda tip, because I wanted to find a way to further like interrogate, further investigate the wheel. Yeah, and not just like the wheel as an object, but the wheel as a like a phenomenon for movement. Yeah, physically and metaphysically.
Yeah, there's a lot of points there. One, when you first said even like the translation that it translates to wheel, when I think of wheel, I think of like a spiral symbol, which is also like a symbol that's all around us, defines life. Actually, in the book that I'm reading, Women Who Run with the Wolves, there is a part where the author is talking about song and the importance of singing, of making music, of songs, and also the drums. One, she was saying how like when someone is using the drum, they're also calling in the spirit of the animal that, you know, whose skin is used on it. But also the drum, she like is describing it as like the life force and relates it to like the heartbeat.
Yeah.
Goes again with rhythm and a lot of the concepts you talk about within your work. It's funny how like the language that you're using very much goes into that theme of like the life force of keeping it going, keeping the energy moving, or even just the story that you told of being in London, it raining. And I know how that weather over there is no joke. It will test you.
It will.
It will test your spirit for sure.
Yes.
I have a very vivid memory of these 4 days. The first time I ever went to London, and it was raining the whole time.
Yeah.
And you know, when you go to a place for the first time, you're like, oh, I want to experience everything. Like, you want the vibes to be high.
Yeah.
And it wasn't giving that. And then I got sick that time. And I was like, I realized, oh, London is a place where you really got to make sure, you know, you keep that energy moving and you're expressing yourself. And
it was so important.
Space, yeah.
It was so important for me in that moment to like, since the vibe was so clearly not there and it was so different than where I was just coming from in Nigeria, I knew I had to create it. So I just went super into the shed, like super into the studio, and was like, okay, world building time, because it ain't happening around me.
So I also want to get into your music and some tracks. Your recent tracks like Elia String, Groove, Wole, Space and Time are described as global, upbeat, and danceable. Which is true, because I was actually listening to your music before you came here today. And I really do like Space and Time.
I appreciate it.
What themes or stories are you exploring in these pieces?
Yes. So Wole, Eleda String, Space and Time, Groove, those were all songs that came up in that ideation process for Ilu Hoda. So in my mind, they're on the soundtrack for the film when I was making them. So there are literal points in the script that I wrote where each one of those songs comes in. S2-EP.3 was also a part of Random Acts of Flyness, Terrence Nance's, HBO masterpiece that I got to work on second season. So I used, like the little budget we had for that to go and rent out a studio, bring as many drums as I could, and I wanted to make a track with just drums, nothing else. And that's how that track came about. Wole is a shortened version of my Ifa name, Ifa Wole. And that track was like a rebirth track. So I wanted to make a song like announcing my new name after I went through initiation. And space and time, yeah, the idea of it is like what we've been talking about, with like drumming being the invocation to move through space and time. And groove, yeah, that one's just, I wanted to, similar to S2-EP.3, I wanted to make a dance track with just drums and my voice. And the reason I wanted to do that is it's medicine. I think that there's medicine in dance and in movement, at least for me.
Right.
If I ever have nerves or if I feel like stagnant, sometimes I can't talk it out. I have to like sweat it out. I have to move it out. And I don't know if everyone's that way, but for me, it's like, it was so present, and like the importance of that for me. So yeah, I would just keep working on the tracks until they made me dance.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's so true too, like to not have language yet. I think sometimes like a lot of people shame themselves for not being able to describe how they feel, and like they're like, and it's just like, it's good that you don't have words yet. I don't think we're supposed to have words yet. I think you're supposed to feel it. What I, as a curator, what I encourage a lot of artists to do is like, art is your tool. You know that,
Yeah.
right? It's not just, work, labor, let me do this to make money, or, be quote unquote this, artist, working artist. It should be used for you first. And I think that's beautiful that you go to it. It's a place where you go to release the tensions, which I think it's what it should be used for.
Yeah. I think especially in like the colonial diaspora and how language has shifted from a tonal, like musical type of thing to, I don't know, this like hyper just intellectualized, but not necessarily like musical way of speaking. Of course, you have like colloquialisms that'll like go against that, and I see that as like an act of resistance. But yeah, it's like certain things aren't meant to be talked about, and I lean into that, as a practitioner of Ifa, I understand that there's certain things that are like what we call Awo, certain things you're not supposed to talk about. And that's fine. It's like there's medicine in that. You find different ways to express it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
whether it's through movement, whether it's through sound, whatever it may be, whether it's through silence, listening, just, knowledge could do all types of different things. It doesn't always have to be shared in that particular kind of way, like through words.
Yeah. You are here in Brooklyn on an amazing opportunity with Pioneer Works. You're currently in a residency with them, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about this residency, how it's been so far? I know you just started. What are your intentions? Like, what's the studio space looking like?
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm so excited. It's my first residency outside of LA, artist residency. So I'm the musician in residence. I'm the sound artist in residence. They have, I believe, 4 visual artist residents right now, and then 1 sound/music artist in residence. I have this cool studio setup. It's kind of like a tree house, and it's made out of shipping containers. So it has a really nice view overlooking the city, and I just have 24-hour access to the studio. So I brought a lot of my drums. I somehow was able to set up them getting a vibraphone for me too. You know, guitar, bass, bunch of microphones. And I'm working on the soundtrack for Iluhoda, continuing to, while I'm simultaneously working on Iluhoda with the means that I have. It's a slow process. The folks at Pioneer Works are really, they're really great, and I'm grateful that they encourage us to just experiment. If I had to think about a presentation at the end of this, I think I'd be approaching my time very differently. And it's been really liberatory to go in there and just, don't get me wrong, I have very kind of like, I'm very action oriented. I have a lot of goals that I want to make and adhere to in my time. I have a certain amount of tracks I want to make. I have a certain amount of, like checks I want to check off, right? But I also get to just go in and experiment. So I get up every day, and I've been commuting from the Bronx to Red Hook, just feel like a working person. Normal working person going to and from work every day. Yeah.
Going to the stew.
Going to the stew.
Cooking up.
Yeah, and it's like finding new ways to bring together these instruments that have different, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with like my process being about time traveling. So like the vibraphone in there is bringing me back to when I was in middle school and high school in the concert band. And the vibraphone was always one of the few instruments where I was like, there's something here, I like this instrument. So to have it in the studio and to be able to play it with a birimbau, or to be able to play it with, atabaki or conga, is I'm just making a bunch of tracks and treating everything like a drum. I play a bunch of instruments. I treat a guitar like a drum. I treat a bass like a drum. I treat my voice like a drum. And even that's like not a new idea. James Brown said that way back in the day, that every instrument in his band was a drum, including all the horns. And you can hear it. You can hear it in how they play.
Okay, that's making me think of just by you talking about your influences and also your research, people that you're referencing and you're inspired by. There's this book called Steal Like an Artist. It's actually a really good book. I'm
familiar with it.
Have you read it?
I didn't read the whole thing,
but
I had a friend of mine, my friend Laven, gave it to me.
Nice.
And I read a bit of it.
It's like a nice handbook.
I think I get the concept of it.
Yeah, so there's actually a part that really resonated with me of like, basically it was like an exercise to list 3 people who, like artists that really inspire you. And then basically it was like to make a family tree based on the artists that influence you. So if you were to mix all these 3 artists together, it would basically, the baby would be you. Like, who are you pulling from?
Ooh.
Yeah. So if you were to do that, the grand question is,
oh my God, it's too many. It's so many.
Okay. Or whose trajectory, like artist trajectory, you're like,
I'll tell
I
you the
do
people
like that. Not exactly like it, but you're like, okay, I could see, my artistic journey, being influenced.
I think what would be easier for me, because once again, like I was saying earlier, I'm so referential. especially when it comes to music, it's so much. I could talk here. We could have a whole other interview just about my references. Because once again, I'm not trying to act like I'm coming up with all these ideas myself or these rhythms even. Like, I'm not really coming up with anything. I'm just remixing things. Lately, I've been listening to a lot of Niboma, Kofi, Olomide, like Papa Wemba. These are all Congolese artists. And a lot of that style of guitar playing, and even the way that they play like percussion and drums, you can hear it in DR, in like merengue and bachata. It's like that style, like that rhythmic style of playing guitar. You hear that also in soukous, and you can hear it in high life, West African music. So I've been like heavy into that. And you can hear that on a lot of the songs I'm working on now. You can hear it on Wole. The way that I'm playing guitar on that is like, that's just me trying to sound like these Congolese guys, or like some of these Anthony Santos songs, When I was first starting to produce music, I was trying to sound like Black Milk from Detroit. I was trying to sound like Jay Dilla from Detroit.
Nice.
Madlib, Flying Lotus.
Oh,
I was just,
Yeah.
I was just trying to wrap my head around how to sample music from my computer. And I don't know if I ever really got it. Perhaps I unlocked it a little bit more when I started using the MPC a little bit later. But, like Pete Rock, DJ Premier, High Tech, those are some of DJ Khalil. These are producers that, like, in the hip hop side of things really influenced me. Then I have like the funk, American funk, it's just like Parliament, Funkadelic, groups like Slave. I love Slave a lot. And American jazz, like Miles Davis, Herbie, freaking Wayne Shorter. I could go on for so long. Brazilian music, Hermeto Pascoal, Milton Nascimento, Gilberto Gil, and Carlinhos Brown, Chimbalada. And then that's not even going into like the traditional music, like listening to like Orisha music, Candomblé music, Capoeira, like Mestre Canjiquinha, Mestre Valdemar, my dad's teacher from Peru Vaz in Brazil. The list go on and on
The
and
scroll,
on
like
and on.
the image of the scroll just rolling on the floor. That's just what happened right now.
Yeah, it's like, and that's just tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not pretending to act like I'm like not influenced by other people, and that I'm not completely just remixing what they've already done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't live as a singular form. We're definitely connected, whether we like it or not. And in terms of career, let's talk about like dreams, expansive dreams. What are some visions that you have for yourself?
Expansive dreams. Before expansive dreams, I also need to give a shout out to Charles Mingus, because he's also somebody who's influenced me a lot. And then even Ravel, Debussy on the classical side of things, and the way that they kind of like orchestrate, even like Bartok, I could go on for days. But okay, sorry, one more time the question.
Expansive dreams.
Expansive dreams.
For yourself, for your career, for your art.
Yeah, so my expansive dream right now is building a multidisciplinary art practice that's, making immersive space, like making installations, right, that have film, that have sound, performance, and, sculptural work inside of them, and to make this film, to make Ilu Hoda, this expansive dream. yeah, but then, and that's just on the artistic side of things. Like I wanna have a family, you know, have
life
kids.
dreams,
Yeah, expansive dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I wanna just, I wanna show up for people and like be a positive influence for, you know, like up and coming people too, like younger folks, and then also like just getting deeper into my babalawo bag also, and like keep continuing to learn Ifa, and you know, like learning the divination piece of things, learning the Odu. Yeah, just like beginning to chip away at that, because that's also super expansive. It's a lot to learn in that, and the canon for in Isese Ifa is like huge, and you know, like for folks who don't know, Isese is it it like translates to the root of Ifa, but you know, you also have different iterations in the diaspora, like Candomblé, where my family's from in Brazil, Santeria in different parts of the Spanish-speaking diaspora. You got like Shango Baptist, I think, in Trinidad. You got a lot of different iterations of it, and you know, it's not too dissimilar from voodoo either, you know, and like, or even like what was happening in the Gullah Geechee and like parts of the south of the states with like hoodoo and yeah, it's just like West African stuff, spiritual practices.
So continuing that journey of
Yeah, you mean that's what I got initiated for,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
to like to start learning.
that's
Yeah.
a lot of deep work
Yeah,
too.
it is, and it informs my art practice. But it expands out so much like further than just art.
Yeah, and also what I'm hearing from you is showing up for community
Yeah,
in other ways too.
yeah,
Not only like, oh, you know, your own individual art practice, but what I'm hearing is like expanding community wise, whether also
Yeah.
families,
Yeah.
babies. I can't wait to see y'all babies. Why when you was talking about family, I imagined you like giving a drum to
Oh, yeah.
to your son, be like, here you go.
Oh, yeah, no,
I
that's-
bestow this.
that's off top, off top. I have photos of me with an agogo before I could walk.
Oh my god.
Literally, like I'm just sitting there, and yeah, and I hear stories about it. I was drumming, because if you're around it as a kid, it's like, and yeah.
I feel like also children are like instinctually they want to make music.
Yeah, and if you're hearing it in the
Literally,
womb, that's the other thing too, you know? So like, yeah, my kids are for sure gonna be drumming.
yes, for sure. I see it. I see it. So speaking of younger generation, if you were to give a piece of advice to the younger generation, or even just like your younger self, what would you say?
Yeah, it's crazy that I'm at this part of my life now, like, but yeah, I think that referential piece, like figuring out how people did it before you, having an elder, or if you don't have an elder, like really doing your research and like figuring out what your parents were into, figuring out what your folks were into, figuring out the history of like whatever land you're in, so that you're not too caught up in like trends, you know, and so that you can make them yourself. Yeah.
Honoring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which includes what's happening currently too. But what I'm seeing with a lot of these younger artists is like they're referencing social media.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it's almost like baseless. It's just
Yeah.
like free flowing in the wind.
Right. Right.
Which is like, I mean, look, it's working for some people, but I don't think that's a way to, I'm not so sure that's a way to make a sustainable practice over time.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's a whole like other conversation around like authenticity, and also what I've been hearing from you through this time is also like reach back. Like there's literally so much history, familial, lineage, ancestral wise to reach back and like pull from that I think many people could also be like surprised by. When you start doing the research, you're like,
and people
so many
feel it.
worlds open
People
up.
feel it.
Yeah.
People could feel it when you start inviting in those stories, those people into your work. When you allow for your ancestors to come into the work, not to sound too, hooky spooky and stuff, but that's kind of like a cheat code. It's like it translates on the exterior as authenticity, but what it really is just like, it's like you inviting other people and like other energies into your work.
That's the collaboration right there.
Yeah,
It's like, how do you invite your ancestors to inform the work? How do you communicate? And
right.
Yeah, but that's also intuition in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it is. Because you have to learn how to talk with them, and it's not like talking in this way.
Right.
So it's a different type of communication.
Dang, wait, that's a whole nother conversation. Because I feel like certain ancestors talk in different ways.
For sure.
Someone could show up as like a butterfly, and then another person shows up through the water or something like that.
Dreams.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yup.
Through songs, just through like thoughts.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Images, sounds.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what it is. I think that same conversation like around social media is that it could easily be a distraction. Like, what does it look like to shut the distractions out, have boundaries, one? Because I think it's okay, yes, to use it as a social app and to have technology be a part of our lives, sure. Yeah. But when do you shut it off and actually be like, okay, let me tune into my own world, let me tune into my work and have that be the main source of inspiration and have that open up intuition in certain ways. Because I think there's a lot of instinctual ways that we connect. We think of connection through technology, but that shouldn't be the main way that we connect. We could literally connect on so many other levels just through our bodies. It's like when you're going through something and your mom magically calls you or your family member calls you and they're like, yo,
all the time to me.
They're like, oh, and they'll call you at a moment where you're like, you knew that something was going on with me because
that happens all the time.
Right. And that's something you can't explain though.
I mean, my explanation for it is that we're connected through our thoughts.
Yes. Yeah.
And that we have the capacity to do that. And that these sort of like cellular networks that we built up are just recreations of what already naturally occurs in us.
Yes.
And I do believe that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that what happens when you place too much emphasis on your phone and social media is that you're telling your brain that you're trying to like switch it out with your phone, essentially. So it's like having an external hard drive for your brain. And I think that's where it's a slippery slope.
It is.
Yeah, it should be supplementary, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And you should be able to turn your phone off and not have an existential crisis when you do it.
Exactly. Yeah. This reminds me of this podcast I would listen to. Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yeah.
That's my man.
Yeah, he's smart.
He's from the Bronx too.
Oh, really?
Yes. I'm low-key like, if I were to meet him, I would be like, come on,
bring it in. In.
But yeah, I listened to this podcast. He has a podcast called Star Talk. And, this episode threw me for a loop because it was talking about AI and consciousness. And basically they were talking about if AI will ever reach a state of consciousness. And they were saying there's a lot of limitations to AI. Yes, it could compute a lot, but it will never, their hypothesis is it will never have a state of consciousness like humans because, for example, there's so much information that we're absorbing as humans because of our consciousness. Also, it said that we have this brain, but we also have a lot of information and another brain like in our gut.
Physiological.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they were saying how, like, for example, even color, the AI can describe color in words from, information on the internet, right? But it could never really perceive color. Like color is a very human experience. Like we could say the color of this orange is, like a sunset, or, like this color can only be perceived by us because of our lived experience seeing it.
Yeah.
But AI will never have this experience of, for example, the texture of this color, the sound from outside. So that level of consciousness could never be done by AI or technology, because as humans, we have such a big capacity for like what we're experiencing.
Yeah. And we can never do what AI does.
Exactly.
You know?
I don't want to be AI.
Right. It's like, what's the deal with this whole trying to like recreate the human experience with like, for me, that's tired. You know, it's, AI is incredible for the ways in which it works, and it's a separate thing. It's its own thing, and it's remarkable. And I think it could help us out in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You know, with my like cover letters and stuff like that, for example.
Exactly.
But it ain't this.
But it ain't.
It ain't this.
It ain't what you do with the drum. It ain't none of that.
No, listen, I did some work once for a producer, generating AI samples for drums. And it ended up just like lighting even more fire under me and like killing out any little lingering pieces of imposter syndrome I might have felt. Because the more I listen to the AI drums, it's like the more apparent it is like what's different about what it's doing and what I'm doing.
Right.
And what's different in the sound of it. You know? Yeah.
I mean, I think, as humans, we are very powerful. I don't know if it's because of the times and this big wave of just information sharing, internet, all the stuff, but like sometimes it takes us away from a lot of the power that we have within like our bodies, you know?
Yeah.
But on that note, my last question is, what are your intentions for what you have going on next? Do you want to share anything, any upcoming projects, what we should be following, looking into from your work?
Yeah. So, Ilu Hoda, the film, is a work in progress. I have a fundraising campaign for it, so folks I'll pass the link to you if folks feel compelled to. Anything helps, self-funding it. And Gavião is the name of my next album, which I'm working on right now. It's my Capoeira name, Gavião, which means hawk. And a lot of the themes in Ilu Hoda are also about my connection with birds spiritually, as another vehicle for movement and travel. I'm thinking a lot about travel, which makes sense too, like coming from two like hyper diasporic peoples, like, with like the Afro-Brazilian, West African diaspora, and then the Jewish diaspora. It's been so much movement. So it makes sense that I'm so infatuated with movement. So Gavião, the album. And then just, follow me on the social media, Avila Santo. And stay tuned for any shows, for music videos, just maybe more talks like this, events. I also am going to be doing more kind of like just community social space making. So that's something to look out for too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Also, a set.
A
here.
set, that's right. We haven't
in
got
the works. In the works.
Yeah, we haven't put the date yet down.
Yes.
Yes. So like I actually started DJing before I started making music.
Which is Honestly, that's a fun fact that I just learned about.
I know, I have so many stories, but okay, so when I was 14, I like begged my mom to get me a pair of vinyl turntables for my birthday. And
What age? What age were you?
I was 14.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And and then she did that. One thing about my mom is like she always found a way to make stuff work for me and to encourage me with the DJing, with the music production. So she got me those. I started like playing some of my friends' parties and like little local get-togethers. And then I met DJ C Brown, who was the Far Side's DJ. Far Side's a hip hop crew from LA. And he had a night, him and his couple other DJs, DJ Panamami, Francesca Harding, who now works for KCRW, Jessica Grande was there too, a couple other DJs whose names I'm forgetting right now. But they had a night in downtown LA at a spot in Little Tokyo. And I used to sneak in there, they used to sneak me in, and I'd open up for them. So that's also like when I started, like kind of seeing heavy hitters in the DJ community, like who I would be opening up for. And so it'll be fun to come in and to, lay a set down. I want to have some stuff that's gonna get people dancing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
gonna be fun.
Dancing here in the studio makes sense.
Yeah, and play some
Yeah.
music that probably no one's ever heard before. Too.
Yeah. Put us on. I
Love
can't
that.
wait. I think that's also beautiful that you you started DJing at 14. And DJing, I mean, just from my personal journey too, you do tap into what you were listening to when you were younger. That's what gets me going with my sets. I'm like, let me play this for the one time. Something that I was listening to in 2005. Like,
yeah. One of the things with DJing too, in the way that I was brought up with like vinyl and turntables, is like you also have to always go back to that referential piece. So it's like you're listening to the original samples of the hip hop songs that I was growing up listening to, for example. Like, okay, Sky's the Limit by Biggie, but now I'm listening to Bobby Caldwell. Or like Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre is going to P-Funk.
yeah.
And so like DJing also led me into this whole mindset of like sampling, which is knowing the people who influence the generations of musicians, right? So DJing is so important for me and my practice as well.
Nice. Well, I can't wait.
Thank you.
Look out. June 2025.
That's right.
Avila Santo DJ set here in the stew.
Processa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming. This was also, I'm gonna say it on camera, I have to shout you out for for reviving this podcast from the ground, calling it up and saying, yo, let's do an interview.
Oh man, I was telling you, that gasses me up.
Yes.
I love bringing dope people out of retirement.
Yes. I was in sleep mode, but we here now.
Bring it in.
Thank you. Bye. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Yeah. And cut.
Oh yeah, no, get cut right away.
Oh yeah, she's like, oh, we're done. Thank you for tuning in to Processa Talks podcast. We are so grateful for all of our supporters and our listeners. If you love what we do, please consider donating to support future episodes and also programs in our studio space. If you'd like to donate, go to processa.art online and hit the donate tab. And also come by the studio where we have a bunch of programs and events. We'd love to see you there. Peace and lots of love. Bye-bye.